Hello, Wolfpack. Today's Haunting Hour episode is a really weird two-parter that seems to be completely underrated by even the most hardcore fans of the show. But hey, you could argue that the show as a whole is very underrated by people nowadays. I have a lot to say, and you want to see a review, so this is my thoughts on the R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour two-parter, The Most Evil Sorcerer.
Unleash the magic. If we lose, then you're to blame. They often used it, maybe abused it, so that why can't we do the same?
So, our episode opens up on the setting of Game of Thrones. No, you aren't watching a medieval times-based show. This is actually the very first Haunting Hour episode to take place entirely in the past. So what timeline is it? I don't know, because guess what? The show doesn't even give you a hint at what year we're in. Good start, guys. From what we can see, though, it's pretty clear that this episode is taking place somewhere in the Middle Ages, since apparently magic is a common everyday thing in this world. We meet our two main characters, Sarah and Ned. Yeah, because isn't Ned a common everyday name in the medieval times? Apparently, our two heroes are picking plants for their abusive master. Hey, wait a minute, these two look familiar. Actually, Ned is the same guy who played Lily's brother back in the Really You two-parter, which is a great review I've done, and the girl is actually the witch sister from My Sister the Witch. Guess she's doing another episode that involves learning about magic. So you could argue that this might actually be an origin story to the witch sister, and this girl might be her ancestor who crossed paths with magic in the past. Or it could all just be a total coincidence with no deeper meaning to it at all, like most wasted plot lines on the show. Anyway, Ned and Sarah go through some exposition about what's going on. Their country is ruled by an evil, all-powerful sorcerer named Margolin. Yes, that is his name. They serve him in order to remain in his favor. In exchange, Sarah keeps the lives of her family safe, while Ned is trying to become the sorcerer's apprentice. However, it's obvious that Margolin does not have their interests at heart and is using them for his own personal gain, since Ned has yet to actually learn magic skills. After gathering supplies for their master's operation, the two pass by the Everfree forest.
The Everfree forest just ain't natural. The plants grow, animals care for themselves, and the clouds move all on their own.
No, really. Ned and Sarah actually pass by and discuss this supposed haunted forest that's full of the most vile monsters ever known to mankind. I'm sure nobody has ever used a forbidden forest as a scary setting before this did. Well, gee, I sure hope this forest doesn't play a big part in the plot later. So when they finish ripping off My Little Pony's infamous setting, the two return to Hagrid's hut, where their abusive master is waiting for them. And believe it or not, but the guy playing Margolin is actually Michael Ironside. Who's Michael Ironside, you ask? Well, just the guy who voiced Ultra Magnus from Transformers Prime, and the well-known voice of Darkseid from the classic Justice League cartoon.
I told you once, Superman. If you would not be my knight, you would be my pawn. I see you're a man of your word. I have many things, Kal-El. You couldn't begin to imagine half of them. But for now, I shall take the role of an executioner. A final gift, my wayward son. A fast death, infinitely preferable to the shame of returning to Earth. There your legacy would be one of fear and distrust. A pariah desperately chasing the favor of a world that cursed your name.
He's mostly known for playing tough, overconfident, all-powerful jerks with a god complex. Here, he plays a tough, overconfident, all-powerful jerk with a god complex, which is best displayed when he rips out the girl's tongue with magic to see if she's telling him the truth. Wait, what?
Precisely. It's always the quiet ones who hide their deceit so well. But I have a little trick to loosen the lying tongue. Turn these
sorcerer rips out Sarah's tongue to see if she's being honest with him about her whereabouts, as we see her tongue still squirming in the palm of his hand as he tries to see if it dies. Are you sure we aren't watching a Game of Thrones episode? Yeah, as gruesome as this scene is, the writers thankfully didn't get caught by the censors because the tongue is placed back into Sarah's mouth unharmed. I'm sure that's how that works. So as you can tell, Sarah and Ned are unhappy living under Darkseid's regime. Yes, I'm just going to call the Master Darkseid because his actual name in the episode is too stupid to take seriously. You know, these scenes about the blatant child abuse could be useful at teaching audiences a serious lesson about the cruel reality that some innocent people live in, and reach out to others by telling a tale about how to escape the abuse. In all fairness, this episode kind of leans towards that direction, but then they completely throw that out the window for an even dumber lesson, but we'll cross that bridge later. So anyway, Darkseid proves to us what a jerk he is by eating like a pig, ordering his servants around, leaving nothing for the kids, and bragging about what a great sorcerer he is. Yes, because the scene where he ripped out a girl's tongue wasn't enough to make you hate this guy. Also, question, if Darkseid is such an all-powerful wizard like he brags about and rules the entire nation, then why does he live in a rundown shack in the middle of a desolate forest? You'd think that the most powerful sorcerer who rules the entire country of nowhere would have a castle or a nice supervillain lair. But no, the ruler of this world chooses to live in an old shack out in the woods because he says he can't stand people begging him to use his powers to benefit their lives. Then why doesn't he just kill them, or threaten to use his magic on them? You know why he doesn't do that? Because Darkseid is not the most evil sorcerer in the title. In fact, he's not the actual main villain. Yes, this episode's big guest star is not the main villain of the Most Evil Sorcerer, despite being an evil sorcerer. Because that's not going to confuse anyone watching this episode, not knowing that there are two evil sorcerers in this story. But back to the main story. As Darkseid continues eating their only food, his soup suddenly turns into snakes. Isn't that the reaction you would have if your food spontaneously turned into snakes? It's like he's only mildly surprised that his food has spontaneously turned into snakes, and he might actually have snakes slithering inside of him since he's been eating it for hours. But nope, I'm sure you wouldn't react in horror if you had live snakes in your hand either. Darkseid reveals that this was an assassination attempt on his life from his old nemesis, Gilda.
I should have known.
Dear Lord, that's the loudest profanity I've ever heard.
So after another scene of Darkseid being a jerk to the kids, he tells the story of Gilda. I bet you never heard this story before. It turns out that Gilda was once his first apprentice he taught magic to before she turned against him, resulting in him banishing her to the unknown world beyond the cursed forest where he'd never see her again. So basically every story where the villain used to be friends with a major character until turning evil, resulting in a basic revenge story and banishment until the modern plotline. Darkseid had Gilda cursed to remain trapped in the dark forest forever, but apparently her magic is slowly regrowing and she's striking back. So if he kept her trapped in the forest all this time, then why does he live in a shack right next to the dark forest his enemy is in? And you can't argue that he's guarding the forest to make sure she's trapped forever, because he outright states that he wished he was far away from his old enemy as possible. Though that does raise the question on why he doesn't use his magic to move away, but he'd rather use his magic to put a protection spell over his house every year. Again, that's something he should have done from the start, and not currently in this episode when the plot kicks off. Ned offers to help Darkseid in an attempt to learn magic himself, but Darkseid says no by ripping off the Force choke from Star Wars. Geez, no wonder Darkseid isn't the main villain, because he's too stupid to be a real threat. Later, Ned visits Sarah and convinces her to help him find Gilda so they can kill Darkseid and gain their freedom. As they travel, we actually get a very serious backstory for them. It turns out that Sarah's only working as Darkseid's slave girl because he threatened to kill her family, and in exchange, she chose to serve him to keep them all safe. while Ned dreams of being a sorcerer so he can finally make something of himself, but can't stand to see other sorcerers abuse their power by harming others. However, they finally make it to...
The Everfree forest just ain't natural.
Meanwhile, we get a pointless scene where we see Darkseid getting blind, stinking drunk. Although he notices that his slave kids are missing, guess what? Nothing ever comes from this scene ever again, and should have been edited out altogether, because Darkseid does nothing about this. Instead, he's so drunk that he passes out. You know, we could have just had the two kids say that Darkseid was drunk or asleep to inform us that he was unaware of what they were doing, but nope, we had to have a completely pointless scene of Darkseid getting drunk, noticing that the kids are gone, and passing out before even doing anything interesting. I actually think that the only reason that this scene was thrown in was because Michael Ironside is the only actor giving a good performance, and they wanted to have him involved more since he's so entertaining. Too bad they didn't make him the most evil sorcerer, because that would have made too much sense. So while the kids get lost in the forest, they end up being chased by trolls rejected from the Neverending Story via shaky cam before ducking in a cave. Believe it or not, we actually get a nice romantic moment between Ned and Sarah as they comfort each other while scared of their situation. Well, they are the only two main characters who are good, so they must end up together. I'll admit that the romance isn't all that bad. It's actually almost nice to see that the writers are capable of doing romantic subplots well, you know, before it got creepy. While they catch their breath, the duo are then being hunted by... Negawolf?
And then prepare for disappointment. You wanted to see me, so I came. But I'll give you one diplomatic chance to end our little squabble.
But before Negawolf strikes them, they end up saved by, of course, Griselda, who ends the episode on her scary face. In part 2, Griselda learns that the kids want revenge on her old foe, Darkseid, and sought her help, so Griselda reveals that she's actually hot. I know I should be impressed by the magical transformation of an ugly old witch turning into a hot girl, but it makes me feel so bad for the elderly actress playing the ugly form. I mean, if you were in her place, would any of you enjoy being credited as the ugly form? So Griselda forms an alliance with the kids. If they help her defeat Darkseid in a magic duel, then she'll teach Ned how to use magic and give Sarah her freedom. All the kids need to do is fool Darkseid into letting his guard down and steal the magic amulet, the source of his power. Wait, you mean that all of Darkseid's abilities came solely from his magical amulet? What kind of power does a magic amulet hold that's so powerful?
Aren't you dead?
Oh, I got the magic amulet!
So the kids return to the not Most Evil Sorcerer's hut to see that Darkseid is still passed out drunk. Yeah, I never thought I'd say that about Darkseid.
I see you.
However, Darkseid wakes up, forcing the kids to form another plan to get the amulet around his neck. You know, instead of just waiting for Darkseid to go back to sleep, they try to get it while he's eating. Brilliant move, right? I do admit that we do get a really intense scene where Ned is contemplating just stabbing his abusive master in the throat to steal his amulet and get it over with, but his companion manages to convince him to remain moral. Luckily, Sarah is the one who takes the amulet away with her random thief skills, giving her something to actually do in this episode. However, before the kids can head off to Griselda, Darkseid realizes that the amulet is gone and asks the kids to help him find it. Yes, Darkseid is so stupid that he actually doesn't realize that the kids stole his magic amulet from him until a few minutes of searching with them. But before he can do anything about it, Griselda breaks in since apparently her curse was broken and she knew where her old enemy lived. Again, good idea hiding from your enemy, Darkseid, by living only a mile from the forest she lived in. Really worked out in your favor, huh? So Griselda defeats Darkseid in a magic duel by turning him into a beetle, but she keeps him trapped forever in a glass jar. I guess she wants to trade Insect Darkseid to Damien Dark for the Atom. So all is good now that the obviously fake villain is taken out from power, and Griselda for some reason moves into the dump shack. Yes, seriously, Griselda wants to move into Darkseid's shack instead of a much better lair because I guess the producers didn't have any money left for another setting. Unfortunately, Griselda proves to actually be an even worse jerk than Darkseid was, as she decides to force the kids to act as her own servants and take over. Oh, so Griselda is the most evil sorcerer promised in the story. And absolutely nobody was shocked by this reveal. All of you who've seen this episode before know what's about to happen next, the scene that makes Griselda the most vicious villain on the show. I apologize for my limited recording equipment, but if you can see the clips, then let this scene speak for itself.
Spells. But you won't. This is the spying eyes. Luminous extra. Luminous extra. What's happening? What's wrong? Ned and I had a disagreement. But I think he'll be seeing things my way from now on.
Talk about eye candy. I don't get it.
Yes, you just saw that. Griselda actually gouged out the eyes of a teenage boy on screen and placed them in a glass jar to hang as a trophy. How did the Haunting Hour get away with this? Did none of the censors think that a show on a family-friendly network having a young man getting his eyes gouged out in front of all the underage viewers would not scar them for life? As horrifying as this scene is, I have to admit that I am seriously impressed with the Haunting Hour's content even more, and how brave they are to actually show graphic imagery like this for kids. It really reminds us why the Haunting Hour was scary in the first place. But that still doesn't excuse that a family show thought it was okay to show all the children under 7 a man getting his eyes ripped out. Oh, and Griselda only used magic to keep the eyes working and in one piece. She didn't use magic to remove the eyes physically. That was real physical torture you just saw.
Hang this picture over your baby's crib tonight. Only big shit.
So, if you didn't run screaming out of the room after seeing a kid getting his eyes gouged out, Griselda uses her magic to keep Darkseid trapped as an insect permanently, and sends him off into the forest forever, trapped in the same fate as she was, via a jump cut. I guess he'll be back with an army of bugs to fight the Powerpuff Girls. So now Griselda is our main villain, and orders her servants to gather magical supplies for her. But Ned is able to trick the most evil sorcerer into giving back his eyes through common sense by pointing out how he needs vision to work for her, and of course she foolishly returns them to him. So, how do Ned and Sarah get out of this one? Well, Ned defeats Griselda by tricking her into sniffing sleeping drugs.
Look, honey, I'm fresh yoga. That doesn't smell like yoga. That smells like...
Are you serious? All that build-up, all that characterization, all that intimidation, a scene that scarred you for life, and how does the all-powerful sorcerer get taken out? She's tricked into sniffing drugs by a kid. This is our main villain, everyone, an idiot who's easily tricked by kids. And yes, Griselda was only a major villain for about 8 minutes. Again, this raises the question on why Darkseid wasn't the main villain, considering that he was much harder to defeat than the actual villain. Seriously, why wasn't he the main antagonist? They spent 2 parts taking down the first villain, but when our real villain takes over, she's taken out in less than 8 minutes. Once again, the Haunting Hour delivers an anticlimactic boss fight because they didn't build up their big villain's intellect. So after the most evil sorcerer is defeated by sniffing sleeping drugs, Ned puts her under a permanent sleep spell and leaves her body in the cursed forest forever. Apparently, this somehow means that Ned is a sorcerer himself, and he takes over the spellbooks to finally learn more about magic. Sadly, Sarah tells him that she's leaving to finally return to her family, telling him that she never wants to see sorcery ever again because it ruins so many lives, including their own. Before she can get far, though, Ned, of course, chooses to be with her instead of following his life's dream of becoming a great sorcerer, so we can get what we're supposed to interpret as a happy ending. Oh, so you see, kids, the lesson of this episode is that if you ever want to have a significant other, then you should give up on all your life's goals so you can finally get a romantic life with someone else. And they say that the haunting hour never teaches kids real lessons. Yeah, I'm sorry, but this happy ending where the two end up together really falls flat for me since Ned gives up completely on achieving his life's goals. You know, his only character arc, just to get with a girl? Not exactly the most happy ending in my opinion, especially since Ned has no job, no money, no parents, and no way of finding what he really wants in life now since he gave up on that goal for a girl. But of course, the story works better if you don't look into it too much and just enjoy that these two finally lived happily ever after. Or do they? Nope, it turns out that a century or two later, a hiker jogging through the forest of course finds Griselda in the dark forest and accidentally resurrects her by, and I'm not kidding, waking her up with a kiss. Yes, apparently the haunting hour thinks that giving CPR is also kissing. So Griselda is alive in the present day, she does a little dance, and we end the episode. Do I even need to say how horrible the conclusion was to this episode? We're actually expected to believe that Griselda has been cursed into a long Sleeping Beauty slumber and her body laid in the dark forest this whole time without rotting away, getting eaten by predators, getting infected by diseases, getting plants to cover her, getting discovered by other people for over 100 years or a century or two, needing any food or water, or simply dying off from the test of time. Does she even need to go to the bathroom? Because you think that the first thing to do is rush to the nearest restroom to let a century build of urine or poop to get out and not attack the guy who saved her life. And yes, Griselda doing some weird dance at the end to imply that she's going to kill the hitchhiker is really cringeworthy, because the last time we saw her, she was defeated by kids easily. Also, it's present day. We have guns, so her being in the present day isn't that scary if we could just kill her easily. This twist ending fails so badly because there are literally too many plot holes for me to even count, which really sucks because I thought this episode started out really strong, but it all fell apart when Griselda took over as the main villain. Also, where are we and what era is it? The story should have been stuck in one timeline and not involve the present day just to scare you with the likelihood of evil sorcerers still being around today in our world. The plot holes are really distracting in the end and destroy whatever fear we were meant to get out of this ending. I honestly like where this episode was going when it started, but when Griselda took over as the villain, it all just came crashing down. It doesn't help that she's the real villain, while Darkseid was just the halfway antagonist. It honestly took so much more effort to bring down the old fat alcoholic idiot who lived right next to his arch enemy than it did to take out the real evil sorcerer. That's how much Griselda sucked as a villain, everyone. Griselda gets taken out by sniffing drugs, while Darkseid had to be outsmarted. And Griselda being alive in the present day isn't that scary because of all the plot holes. The fact that she had an embarrassing defeat, and the fact that Griselda took over as the villain so last minute. It makes me wonder why Darkseid wasn't just the main villain instead, since he's more of a threat than the woman who's supposed to be our real villain. The two kids weren't that bad, though, and did have some interesting traits, and do get a happy ending in the end, despite my personal disagreements about how much of a happy ending, but they are definitely likable characters you want to root for and hope they survive. I give this two-parter a 6.5 out of 10. It had a very strong start, and a lot of interesting things in it, especially with two actually developed characters, Michael Ironside's great performance, an intriguing setup, and a magical theme. But as I keep saying, the story fell apart when Griselda took over as the real villain, thanks to her unimpressive powers, a humiliating defeat, and that big plot hole central twist ending that felt too forced. The Most Evil Sorcerer might have had a spark of magic, but for me it had trouble staying lit all the way through. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, or just tune in for more videos posted here on Wolf Entertainment. I'm your host, Catastrophe, and I'll see you all later.
Unleash the magic, unleash the magic. If we lose, then you're to blame. They all have used it, maybe abused it. So then what can't we do?